the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, and a panel of 27 MPs from the European Union are set to visit there. Today they met the Prime Minister, they met the National Security Advisor. Many of our opposition leaders say, 1 minute, why is this happening? Why is it that EU leaders are being allowed to go to Jammu and Kashmir when so many Indian mainstream leaders in the opposition were not allowed to go there at all?
A 27-member team of MPs from the European Union meeting Prime Minister Modi today ahead of their visit tomorrow to Jammu and Kashmir to get a feel of the ground situation. The first such visit by an international group since the scrapping of Article 370. While addressing the MPs, the Prime Minister, without naming Pakistan, stressed on the need to collectively fight those who sponsor terrorism.
Urgent action must be taken against all those who support or sponsor terrorists or support such activities and organizations, or use terrorism as a state policy. There should be zero tolerance for terrorism.
And in a statement after the meeting, the centre said their visit to Jammu and Kashmir should give the delegation a clear view of the development and governance priorities of the region. These MPs who have come to India in their private capacity also met National Security Advisor Ajit Doval.
But I want to see on the ground how it actually is and talk to some local people as well. But what I think we all want is normalcy and peace and a good life for everybody.
80% of the European Union's Kashmir delegation is from right-wing parties. 22 out of 27 MPs are affiliated to far-right parties. Only 3 out of the 27 MPs are from left or liberal parties. Their visit comes a month after the European Union expressed concerns about the situation in the state, saying, "We remain concerned about the situation on the ground with its restrictions on fundamental freedoms. It is crucial that freedom of movement and means of communication are fully restored, as well as access to all essential services."
I think it only makes sense for them to visit Ms. Mufti, who's a former Chief Minister, Omar Abdullah, Farooq Abdullah, not just the former Chief Ministers, but all the political detainees. Let them meet, the political detainees, let them meet lawyers, let them meet everybody who's been arrested.
If PMO can host a EU member delegation and facilitate their visit to Kashmir, then why are they not extending the same courtesy to the opposition members and opposition leaders who are PMO's own countrymen?
The visit to the valley by a group of EU parliamentarians is all set to bring the international attention back to the Kashmir situation. It would be significant now to see how much access these EU MPs will be given to interact and meet with political stakeholders in the valley, and what stand they take with regard to the situation on the ground after the visit. In Delhi, Himanshu Shekhar for NDTV.
Well, why exactly has the government gone about this in this manner, allowing 27 odd MPs from the European Union to travel to Kashmir when our own leaders aren't allowed to travel? The Rajya Sabha MP and senior Congress leader Anand Sharma joins us in a little while from now. I'll also be joined by Michael Kugelman, the Deputy Director and Senior Associate for South Asia and the Asia Program at the Wilson Center, Suhasini Haidar, the Diplomatic Affairs Editor of The Hindu, and Deshratan Nigam with me in the studio. But first, let me go across to Mr. Sharma. Sir, I assume the argument that the government would raise would be that if opposition leaders did go into Jammu and Kashmir, particularly Srinagar, in a situation like this, where the security environment is particularly frail, then there's a serious possibility of violence on the ground. I assume that that is what the government would argue. How would you contest that?
And that would be an absurd argument. We are a constitutional democracy and the Parliament of India is sovereign. The government is disrespecting that and also insulting the privileges of Indian members of Parliament. India stands as one when it comes to fight against terrorism. It's not a question of the ruling party or the opposition leaders or the opposition MPs. India cannot be divided on this issue. At the same time, we are clear that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. So first right to go there and to meet with the stakeholders, with the civil society organization belongs to us. So we cannot be denied our right that when Indian parliamentarians and opposition leaders go there, we are detained at the airport, whereas you want to showcase, but showcase what? We have no objection to the other countries' people visiting us or going to any part of the country. But at the same time, we have consistently and firmly maintained, not this government, the previous governments, that Jammu and Kashmir is an internal affair of India. So whatever is there, first is the concern of the Indian Parliament, and the government has a duty to inform our own parliamentarians and the parliamentary committees.
Mr. Sharma, one moment, sir. Sir, if I can just slip in a question over here so that we can have a dialogue over here.
Accountable to the Indian Parliament
sir,
and to none else.
Among the leaders who met the National Security Advisor and the Prime Minister earlier on today, right, were 3 Kashmiri leaders. Muzaffar Beg, a former Deputy Chief Minister, Altaf Bukhari, a former PDP leader, and Usman Majid, a Congress leader and former minister. So the argument which some in the opposition have said that these people may not get the opportunity to see somebody who is actually representative, how would you respond to that, particularly since we've got 3 of these Kashmiri leaders who met them today? All right, I apologize. Okay, we've got the line again. So could you hear me, sir, with that question? Mr. Sharma, can you hear me now?
My voice.
Yeah, all right. We'll fix the echo in your voice.
I can hear you.
All right. I will ask you that question one more time. We lost your line there for a moment. Altaf Bukhari, Usman Majid and Muzaffar Beg, 3 Kashmiri leaders, 2 with the PDP or formerly with the PDP, 1 apparently still with the Congress, met these 27 European leaders in the presence of the National Security Advisor. So why do you assume that there will not be true representation of all sorts of Kashmiri voices when this delegation goes to Kashmir?
Is this a question to me?
Yes, sir.
See, what I was saying is that about the Indian Parliament is the rights and privileges of the Indian MPs which have been denied by the government. On the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, there is a national consensus about it being an integral part of India. Its succession to the Union of India has been final and irrevocable. We have throughout maintained that it is our internal matter. We are not saying that nobody else should go there. But at the same time, the government has a lot to explain. Why is it being selective and discriminatory?
But sir, you aren't answering my question. I'm saying there are mainstream Kashmiri leaders who are with the National Security Advisor in his lunch table apparently or table where he met all of these European leaders. And the government says that they are representative of the voices that many of these leaders from the EU will see on the ground. So my question is, how would you respond to that? People like Usman Majid, a Congress leader.
Well, the leader of opposition in Parliament or in Rajya Sabha is the former Chief Minister of Kashmir, Ghulam Nabi Azad. Then they should be meeting him. They should be meeting Farooq Abdullah, Umar Abdullah, the former Chief Ministers, or for that matter, Mehbooba Mufti. They should be meeting the other representative civil society organizations.
So Usman Majid doesn't represent the views of your party?
No, can the government handpick? Can the government handpick? Or is it for my party to decide? Has the EU MPs sought meeting with the Indian National Congress? The answer is no. Has the government ever communicated to us? The answer is no. Has the government briefed formally in parliamentary committees, standing committees? The answer is no. So
what about Usman Majid? Usman Majid, a former minister and a Congress leader, does he not speak for your party?
I am not getting into that. I'm sorry that when you have in your own parliament a leader of opposition who is also former chief minister, who was detained every time he went there. All of us were detained when we went to Jammu and Kashmir, to Srinagar. Ghulam Nabi Azad had to go to Supreme Court to petition for a visit, which he has a right to visit his home state. So how can the government decide for the opposition parties? And if you have a panel of MPs coming from another country, those MPs are free to approach the political parties. We are a parliamentary democracy and a multi-party one. It's not for the government then to dictate and determine in this manner.
All right.
And what justification can the government give for not allowing your own members of parliament? And parliament session is going to start soon. The government will have many questions to answer.
All right, Mr. Sharma, I would invite you to stay on in this debate. You'd wanted a one-on-one interview. You've got that. I would invite you to actually stay on in this debate so that you can offer your perspective.
No, I would not. I would not prefer that. I am not getting into that. You asked me questions, I have responded. That's our position.
But sir, you know, in the spirit of democracy, it would be nice. It's your option, sir. It's entirely your option, and I was just offering it to you.
I'm very clear about it.
Right.
That's to what we had arranged.
Right. No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Your call.
Record.
I was making an offer to you. That's all, sir. But
I am talking. Listen, Vishnu, I am talking of the sovereignty and respect for the Indian Parliament.
Right.
That's all.
Okay. Fair enough, sir. Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. And we'll reflect on the points you're mentioning.
Thank you.
Deshratan Nigam, how would you respond to that central point? Why have you stopped Indian leaders from going? Why are these European leaders going? No one is stopping them, but then why stop our leaders?
See, let us be very clear. This is about international diplomacy and managing international opinion.
But come on. I mean, what about our political leaders?
I'm coming to that point. So, this was a private visit by the EU parliamentarians, first time elected, newly elected, I would say, not the first time. And secondly, you know, some of the provocative speeches that were given by Ghulam Nabi Azad in the parliament when 370 was abrogated, and Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary in Lok Sabha, and certain PDP and NC leaders prior to abrogation of 370. The central government has been very wary about them, slightly concerned also. And since a great step had been taken, so it was always possible that they could be provocative in the Kashmir Valley, and we are not discussing the entire J&K and Ladakh. We are only discussing few districts of Kashmir Valley. Let us be very clear. That is the only region where they have not been allowed. In fact, the Supreme Court agreed with the contentions of the central government when they filed petitions out there. They said you will only go and meet this particular person and you will not go anywhere else, because they were also concerned that they might be provocative and that might disturb the situation.
Okay.
So therefore, it is in that context when the when they went in a truckload, I would say plane load, they did not even take the permission of the central government. They tried to bulldoze inside.
But sir, isn't it a bit strange that you would need the permission of the government to visit a part of your own country?
No, I'm not saying so.
No, but sir, I mean,
rights and
no.
Reason being, a monumental step had been taken. One. Secondly, when you talk of rights, there is also duties and responsibilities associated with this parliamentarians.
So you can assume that they would create trouble on the ground without actually allowing them to go there.
See, the fact
not
is,
one or
all
two,
those
but pretty much all opposition
all
leaders.
those contentions were raised in Supreme Court. Supreme Court, in its wisdom, restricted their movement out
So
there.
foreign diplomats not allowed. Some American representatives who wanted to go there not allowed. Not all foreign journalists allowed over there.
Let me tell you.
No opposition leaders
let me give
allowed.
you.
No, I'm just giving you the list. And then there are these EU leaders who are allowed.
Let me tell you.
So when the opposition says, look, hello, let us in as well, it seems a bit strange.
Let me answer about the list that you've given. Most of these people had come with a very preconceived negative opinion. Even some of the American, senators or whatever you call them, and the journalists, they came with preconceived notions. None of these people have given an opinion.
So these people who've come now have a positive notion.
No, I'm not saying. They are coming with not with any opinion. Let us be very clear. They are visiting there. They'll find out. Now, others, that the list that you given, they had already made up their mind what to say about.
But how do we know what mind they've made up? I mean, let them come in.
No. These people you're talking about.
All right. So we'll end up having a chat just between us. So Hasni, you've heard what Mr. Deshratan Nigam has said. How would you respond to what he says, that people who'd wanted to come in earlier on, maybe they were American representatives, perhaps even diplomats, they'd made up their mind about Kashmir, whereas these people have not made up their mind. How would you respond to that central point?
I'm not sure how we know this. To start with, the fact is that these are all MEPs who are on a private visit. Neither the European Union nor the European Parliament and nor any of the embassies that they are attached to actually says they know that these MEPs were even visiting. So I'm not sure how we judge whether they have preconceived notions or not. The simple fact is this: India has said very consistently that Kashmir remains an internal matter for India. Over the last few months, the government has reiterated this and said, we will not allow Kashmir to be internationalized. We don't need a certificate from anyone else for what we are doing inside Jammu and Kashmir, which is Indian territory. So the first question really is that at a time when it is judged not conducive for the situation on the ground in terms of security reasons, to allow either journalists, foreign journalists based in Delhi, allow diplomats who are based in Delhi, or allow any other UN special rapporteurs or US congressmen or anyone else to go into Srinagar. How is it that 27 members of the European Parliament have been allowed in this manner? I think there is a certain ad hocism to what we're seeing here. I think it certainly seems as if what the government is responding to is the barrage of bad publicity they've got on the issue. But I think very clearly, Vishnu, the government has to decide. Are they taking these decisions with a view to how the international community sees them? Or do they say, these are internal matters of India. We certainly don't need to prove anything to anyone from the outside, in which case we don't even need this delegation.
All right.
Need to come in here.
You wanted to respond to that? Yeah, go ahead.
See, inviting people or going there does not change the status as of being the bilateral matter between India and Pakistan. It does not.
No,
change.
I think the point is allow anybody to go in there.
No,
why handpick people? Because it doesn't. It's not convenient.
It is the discretion of government in its wisdom with the intelligence reports that they think whom to allow and whom not to allow. One. So you have to give that discretion to the government. Secondly, let me tell you.
Sir, as a senior lawyer yourself, as a fighter of rights,
yes,
how can you say something like that?
The
intelligence agencies are saying that you cannot allow some leader. I
am saying
we are all Indians, sir. This is our country. That goes without saying.
Let me respond. You made a very serious allegation. You know, with great responsibility, let me tell you, there is a sense of responsibility with this government. And it is controlling the movement as of now of the leaders who were very provocative in the past, and government is still not very sure about them and that what they will do. The kind of bombs will explode and aag lag jayegi, barood ho jayega. Those were the kind of statements that the government has dealt with.
Okay.
So therefore government is slightly wary and concerned also. And at the same time, when you talk of these leaders, there is also a sense of duty and responsibility enjoined on them also.
All right.
So you have to take care. And the bilateral status does not change because EU is coming in.
Okay, one sec. I want to go across to Michael Kugelman. Michael, you've been listening in on all of this. Is it your belief that the international perspective on Kashmir is changing? In the US congressional hearing on human rights in South Asia a few days back, Alice Wells, the US Acting Secretary of State, said, revocation of 370 is not what we care about. It is about how Kashmiris live their lives. Later on, she said that it is a humanitarian crisis. Yes, they did slam Pakistan as well, but when the US, speaking for the United States government, the US Acting Secretary of State says it is a humanitarian crisis, is there a visible change between what the situation was earlier and what it is now?
Well, I think we have to distinguish between the Congress here in the United States and the executive branch. Certainly, it's been a long time since there has been so much negativity on Capitol Hill about India. It's been a long time since India has been criticized so heavily as it has been now. But I would argue that the Trump administration, the State Department, the White House, its criticism has really not gone beyond concerns about human rights. I mean, Alice Wells made it quite clear that it sees this whole situation as an internal one, that it's the human rights part of it, the humanitarian component of it that's a concern. So I don't see that as something different. But to be sure, there is a perception here in Washington that the human rights situation in Kashmir is particularly troubling right now, and particularly in terms of what has happened there since August 5. But it was very interesting in that hearing that happened on Capitol Hill last week. What Alice Wells, who's the senior U.S. official in South Asia at the State Department, what she had to say about Kashmir and India was much less critical than what we heard coming from members of Congress. And of course, it's not members of Congress that make policy here. They don't make policy in India. It's the Trump administration that does that. And I just think that you're not hearing quite as much criticism from the Trump administration compared to the comments you're hearing from elected officials on Capitol Hill. And they themselves are responding to complaints that they're hearing from their constituents. That's what's at play there.
I think, Michael, I'd mentioned that the quote on humanitarian crisis was, the words humanitarian crisis was referred to by Alice Wells. In fact, it wasn't. That was referred to by Robert Destro, the Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Democracy. So a second American official who was asked whether Kashmir was a humanitarian crisis, and he said, yes, it is. So the point being, it's more widespread. Now, Suhasini, apart from the United States, where is the international standpoint on India right now as far as Kashmir is concerned? Why would the government invite these 27 MPs from the EU, have they not been absolutely certain that they will ultimately endorse India's position? In other words, were they handpicked?
Well, I mean, that's a question for the NGO that has invited them. It's not a very well-known NGO, so I'm afraid we'll have to leave it at that. But I do want to ask, your panelists seem to suggest that these are people without preconceived notions, and these are people who have not made inflammatory statements in the past, so they have an open mind. But I'm not sure the panelist is aware of just who is on this delegation, as your channel itself has looked at the backgrounds of these MEPs. They're essentially from France's far-right party, the Rassemblement National, Poland's Justice and Law Party, also right-wing, Germany's Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, which is their most right-wing party, UK's Brexit party, Italy's Forza Italia. Those are the parties that make up this delegation. When they are not here with their apparently non-preconceived notions, they're making statements anti-immigration, very, very conservative, traditional, trying to keep outsiders out of their country. So, I'm not very clear about just why the panelist thinks this particular delegation of 27 is okay, but not, for example, diplomats of the European Union who are based in Delhi, who have been here, or foreign correspondents who work in India as well. Why this?
But to be sure, Suhasini, not all of them are from right-wing parties. We've checked, and yes, the numbers are overwhelmingly from a certain political affiliation, not all of them. And I think it's a jump of faith to assume that they would have a certain perspective on Jammu and Kashmir until we actually know what they end up saying. We don't know that as yet. I mean, it's my simple point.
I was just making the point that, yeah, all right. But I also do want to ask Vishnu the other question of where this becomes a little troubling. The government says it has nothing to do with this delegation, that it is essentially an NGO, a non-governmental organization that invited them to India. We've heard from the MEA saying we are not coordinating this visit. Officials of the MHA, officials in Jammu and Kashmir say we're not coordinating this visit either. So the real contrast, Vishnu, you have to make is between those, as I said, all these other people from abroad who have asked for permission to go and have been denied, between the Indian polity that has asked for permission and has also been denied, and this group that seems to have absolutely no sort of official backing to it, but has it within just today met Prime Minister Modi met Vice President Venkaiah Naidu, has had lunch hosted by National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, and is having dinner with the External Affairs Minister Jaishankar.
So irrespective of who brought them in, you're saying that they have been sort of selected, or they've been accepted by the government a day before they go to Kashmir,
there's heavy dose of government approval for this group.
All right. Again, the question is this: are they essentially handpicked?
No. I think that's stretching it beyond, human mind's proportion. That's the speculation one can, anybody can do it. Just handpicked without any proof or anything. And I mean, it is expected. This NGO is better, other NGO is not better. So that kind of an argument is always built up like that. My NGO is good, your NGO is bad. So anything that NGO does is supposed to be bad. That kind of argument I don't think I am going to buy. And secondly, the human life, the aspect that the human life, that collateral damage is not taking place there. That is where the government is more worried. It has given precedence over human life than day-to-day human rights. And the situation has improved from 5th, 6th or not. Yes, it has improved a lot.
Yes.
Nobody can deny the fact. The changes are slow. They are taking place in a positive direction. And we must be very hopeful with the way the government of India is handling, giving a high priority to the loss of, preventing the loss of human lives out there.
Now, Michael, let me ask you this. The common way in which this is being reported in the Western media is that there is a human rights outrage in Jammu and Kashmir. The voices of real people in the state are not coming out, partly because physically they cannot communicate. There's no internet. Till recently the phones weren't working. What if one is to spin this around the other way and say that, look, one moment, if you've got a former deputy chief minister, a former PDP leader, the PDP was a partner with the BJP in the last government in Jammu and Kashmir, and a former Congress minister, along with academics and others on this round table with the National Security Advisor today, all Kashmiri people meeting these EU representatives, then isn't the government of India's perspective that, look, hang on a second, who said Kashmiris aren't speaking? Who said that they don't agree with us? Isn't that an argument that the international community also needs to look at?
Well, certainly one could make that argument, though I would think that one of the big concerns in this town continues to be the large number of people that had been detained in Kashmir since August 5th, and that has not changed. But I think the big issue here when it comes to why the U.S. and why the West has been reacting critically in the way it has in terms of media coverage, in terms of what we heard from members of Congress, I think that India is held to a high standard, or there's a sense that it should be held to a high standard as a democracy, as the world's largest democracy, and that these issues that are happening in Kashmir are things that are troubling for those that would like to see India as a large, robust, dynamic democracy, even if indeed things may be gradually improving in the valley, and we're hearing that some of the lockdown is being relaxed and all that. There remains the concern, why is it taking so long for things to, quote, return to normal? And why is the government making it so difficult for those that would want to see the situation on the ground to see it if the situation is indeed normal or improving? So I think there's an issue of expectations and holding India to a different standard than Pakistan, for example, would be held to in this regard.
I think that's a fair point.
No, see, let us see how the narrative has changed in the valley. There used to be demonstration, protest, and there used to be violence with police or the defense forces firing at the people. Now the narrative has changed. The terrorists are killing the civilians and the Kashmiris and the businessmen, the apple orchard owners, and that narrative is what government had it worried about, and that is where the government took its time slowly and slowly continues to act too. And the people are slowly turning against the exact setup, the neighboring Pakistan, the kind of trouble it is fomenting. And these terrorists who are actually now, today even there was an attack on Sopore, and where 15 people were seriously injured.
Some of them were injured.
So that is what the government is worried about. And imagine if everything is relaxed immediately, the mayhem, maybe there were thousands of people at that point of time. These bombs could have killed, 200 people or injured 200
so
people.
the essential point, and I will wrap this debate up with that, is does one look at Kashmir from a security prism, of a law and order prism, or does one look at it from a human rights prism, a prism of political freedoms? Do we look at it in terms of access for Indian politicians to a part of India, or do we look at it as a foreign policy issue where India is trying to send a foreign policy message to people in the European Union? Where really does all of that lead us? I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us.